Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Super excited about today's episode. We're joined by Lori Winkler, Senior Vice President and Chief HR Officer at Zimmer Biomet. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. It's wonderful to be here. Super excited.
Before we go any further, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where you are now at Zimmer Biomet.
Yeah, happy to do that. So, I've been in human resources for about 27 years or so. Did not start out in HR. I think as you would find with most CHROs, I was in business operations. But I started out with a company down in Florida. I essentially grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and in high school, we moved to South Florida, and that's pretty much where I stayed until one of the companies that I worked for relocated me up to New Jersey, which is where I live right now. It's been a really interesting journey for me because I sort of learned HR on the fly. Did go back to school to get a master's degree in human and organizational development, which helped a little bit, but I'm all about experiential learning. And it's been a really interesting ride for me throughout the years. I've had a lot of great and diverse experiences. Most of my career, I was with Johnson & Johnson and feel really good about that. That was just a wonderful place to really cut my teeth in HR and learn so much about the function and, of course, about business. I do live on a retired horse farm in a very pretty part of New Jersey. It's sort of like farmland out here, and I enjoy the isolation and I enjoy the peace, but it comes with its challenges as well. But I'm certainly enjoying it, and I live with a beautiful little fur baby, yellow Labrador named Janie, who's my buddy and hangs out with me when I work, and that sort of sums it up right there. What's happening with me?
Wow. There's so much to unpack there, just to get started. So talk about your upbringing then, because you mentioned to me a few times you come from humble beginnings.
I do. Yeah. So I'm an only child. Both parents worked when I was growing up. I lived in Brooklyn in a pretty modest apartment. I was what you called back then a latchkey kid because both parents were working. So I was sort of on my own starting at like age 11. And I really understood the value of working hard for getting what I wanted. I knew that in order for me to get what I wanted, I would need to work for it. Nothing was really handed to me. Both parents instilled a pretty strong work ethic in me. And as I often say now, there's a lot of PhDs in my function, in the HR function. And I always say, well, I'm a PSD, poor, smart, and driven. So
we share that in common.
Right. There you go. So that sort of tells a little bit about my story. I've been working since I'm 14 and really believe in just putting my head down and getting the job done. That's sort of how I was raised.
I love that, by the way, the PSD. I'm going to steal that 100%.
Because I grew up. People want to steal that.
That's a good one. I grew up as a single parent. My mum raised us 4 kids on her own. We lived in a council estate, in a room, basically like a hostel for many years, had no money. And I never went to school, didn't go to college, university. I just went straight into work, really just to help feed my brothers and sisters and help my mum out. I was like, I didn't even have the luxury. Even if I wanted to go to university, I needed to help make money to pay the bills and make sure we have food as well. So but for many years, for me, I felt that was I was a bit ashamed of that, to be honest. Of not being able. But then years later, I realized actually this is my biggest superpower, is that my resilience and the stuff I've had to go through. When I saw people complaining in my first corporate job when I was like 18, they're having a bad day. I was like, you have no idea what a bad day is. Context. Yeah. I
mean, really, it's character building, and we don't realize it when we're living through it because we're too young. But when you reflect back, it really helps build character. Yeah. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. Me
neither. I would not be where I am today. Similar with my co-founder, he was my next door neighbor. We went through all these hardships together. We pushed through. And that's why we are where we're now, and we're fearless in many ways. And we always talk to each other about focusing on seeking discomfort. Seek discomfort is one of our It's one of our things that we constantly talking about, because if we're not uncomfortable, then we're not moving the needle.
Agree.
As well. First, also congratulations on the new role. How is it? Is it your first CHRO role, if I remember correctly?
It is my first CHRO role, and I've been in the role about a year. I feel as though I was well prepared for it, just given the different experiences that I've had in my career. But it's quite the time to be a CHRO, as I'm sure you're hearing from many of my colleagues, given what we're facing externally between this pandemic and, just socioeconomic challenges. And it's just been a really interesting time. But frankly, I have to say, I think I'm pretty well equipped for it, because they always kind of referred to me in HR as like special forces. When I was working in some other, different companies, they used to sort of parachute me in when things were pretty challenging in a specific environment, and I'm just able to navigate my way through. So it's been challenging for sure, but very gratifying, because I never imagined that I'd be working through some of the issues that I'm working through with my team.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, you pretty much started at the company at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Like literally,
I did.
Like the last 2 years, you've been there 2 years, and you've pretty much been 2 years now. What a time to...
Literally, I started and the pandemic hit.
Wow. What a time. And obviously, and what was the role you started as, if you might remind me?
I was the group vice president of HR for our global businesses. So that was a pretty big job, and a good, I would say, platform to get to the next level. But it was very intense, as you can imagine, because we're in the elective surgery business. So, we were feeling this pretty early on. But you know what? You just do what you got to do to get through it. And I think that, we mobilized as an organization, we mobilized as an HR team. And I think that, we were able to come up with some really, I would say, really strong short and long-term solutions that we continue to leverage. So it's been interesting. It's been very interesting.
Do you think that you're ever fully prepared to take that and step up to be a CHRO? Like, what have you learned over the last, has it been a year now almost since you've sat in the seat?
Yeah, I'll be very, very frank with you. There's always that sense of trepidation, like, oh my gosh, can I do this? I mean, I know I have the experience in terms of, my HR experience and my business experience, but, am I going to be able to do this? And what brought me, some comfort around that is that without naming names, I know a few CEOs that I've worked with over the years, and they have shared with me that when they got the top job, they were like, okay, I think I'm ready for this, but let's see how it goes. And that's sort of the approach I took. I don't think there's a textbook. There certainly isn't a playbook. There wasn't for me. So in my mind, you've got to do what challenges you and what creates a little bit, as you said earlier, discomfort, a little bit of fear and trepidation, because I think if you power through that, the rewards are pretty fantastic. And that's sort of the approach that I took.
Yeah.
I just said, I'm ready for it. I'm going to do it. And let's see how this goes.
Yeah. And you're right. It's one of the most terrifying things I've ever had to do is be the CEO of my own startup. Because I don't have all the answers. I still don't have all the answers. I don't know. I'm learning as I go along. I'm listening. I'm taking feedback. I fall over sometimes. I make mistakes. It happens, but I wouldn't change it for anything. I
agree.
Yeah.
I feel very similarly. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, I've been doing this not as long as you, but for about 15 years. But what it means to be a CHRO now is very different to when I started. Almost completely different in many ways. What do you think are the sort of core skills and competencies needed to be a CHRO in this new world of work that we find ourselves in?
I would say, Chris, even beyond CHRO, I think any leader needs to have a great deal of empathy. Empathy is something that, I think in the past we've thought of as very soft and squishy and, not necessarily a leadership capability or competency that we would focus on. But given the last 3 years, because we're going on year 3 of this, and what not just our team members, but what our friends and our family and our neighbors and our communities have gone through, I think demonstrating empathy and compassion for others is really, really important. And I think listening and really paying attention to what folks have to say and allowing them the space to share what's on their minds and honor that is really, really important. So I would say listening skills, empathy. I do think you need to have the ability to bring order to chaos, which I think is one of my strengths. And I think it's very important to have that because there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions around what's going to happen. And, we continue to coexist with COVID and all the new mutations of COVID. Not that I'm making light of it, but, it's not going away anytime soon is really my statement here. And I think that it's important to have leaders that can mobilize their teams and help bring some structure around the work that needs to get done. And so I would say, again, I'm going to repeat, I would say empathy, listening, somebody who has the ability to bring some structured thinking and structured approaches so that there's some guardrails for folks to work within. And, not lose sight of the work. I mean, we still have a business that we have to run. We still have a talent strategy we have to execute. We still have to, develop our people and bring new capabilities in. That cannot get lost in the context of what's going on externally. But those are a couple of the attributes that I think are really important.
Yeah, no, I love that.
And agility. I'm so sorry, Chris. Agility, which is one of my favorite words. And I used to think agility was just something that John Cotter talked about until I actually had an experience working with his group when I was at Johnson & Johnson. And I really got some great insight about what agility really means. And boy, do we need that more than ever now. You have got to be agile and able to pivot, though I think that word is overused, but it's the best word I can think of in these times because there's shifting dynamics.
You won't survive. You won't exist.
Exactly.
we were the same. We had to pivot our business literally the opposite direction overnight. Whilst every physical events company shut down because of COVID, we were like, well, we can either just shut down or we can completely reinvent the company. And we sat there for a week and completely mapped everything out and then went straight and executed. And whilst most of the companies just didn't come back. And those are the companies, if you look at like the previous, 2008 crash, stuff like that, it's the companies that were agile through that, who are the household names that we all talk about, who came out of that, those times and went, succeeded as well. But I love the point you made, though, by the way, as well, that this isn't about just HR. These are skills and competencies for every leader, because HR is the business. We'll get into that in more detail as well. I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, because I never really speak about this much, but you said, I know so many leaders that come from within the business and then sit in a CHRO role who then, for some reason, feel the need to then go and do a master's in HR. And many of them tell me, you didn't say this, but many of them tell me it was a waste of time. Off camera, they say the experience I learned from doing it for 5-6 years, I don't know why I then went and got, after reflecting, I didn't really learn much. What's your experience? Because you kind of, your face when you mentioned it earlier, you were like, I didn't really learn much.
Well, I have to say, and really being frank with you, I felt as though I needed something to give me a foundation as I ventured into a career in HR. And I found I do enjoy going to school. And I found going back for that master's degree in human and organizational development gave me some really good insights about how, well, I'll rephrase that, gave me some really good insights about how the function operates and gave me a great historical perspective. Does it help me in my everyday job? Absolutely not. And I do have to share, if I could, just a little anecdote
100%.
about that.
Yeah.
So when I was at Johnson and Johnson, I did a lot of different roles there because, they rotate you through different experiences because the company is so big. And one of my last jobs there was to lead HR for global finance and work for the chief financial officer. And when he interviewed me, he went to like the third page of my resume, which nobody ever has done. And he actually said, "You have a master's in human and organizational development. I'm not even sure what that means. And how does that make you effective in your job?" And I didn't miss a beat. I just said, it doesn't. It does not make me more effective in my job. It just really gave me some good foundational insights about the function, but certainly didn't teach me how to operate in human resources.
Yeah.
So, and I would say that that's the truth. I didn't view it as a waste of time.
I may have say waste of time. I was being a bit extreme when I said that earlier, but what my point is, for example, my wife's sister, she went to study her master's in HR, and I did say to her going in, this isn't going to prepare you for the job. And I will give you some like kind of exactly how you described it. It's kind of similar to how I described it. And she was like, "What do you mean though?" And I was like, "Trust me." And within a few months, she was like, "Everything I'm learning is the opposite of kind of what I'm hearing about on your show, Chris, or what I'm hearing from," because she listens to our podcast. And I was like, "Yeah, this is different. Like that's not going to prepare you to go and sit in the seat and be a HR leader tomorrow." And that's the misconception I think some people get when they think they go and do their. So when I ask HR leaders, would you rather hire someone who has the experience, or would you rather hire someone who studied? 100% say I'm going to hire someone with the experience.
And I would fall in that category as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wasn't expecting to bring that up. It's just, you said it earlier and I've never spoken about that on the show, but I thought it's important for people that are on their journey to realize that yes, it's great to have it. You don't need it though. You don't have to have it as well. Looking back at your career, you've had such an amazing career. It's not over yet, obviously, as well. And what's a moment that stands out to you that you're most proud of?
Yeah, this is an easy one for me. This was when I was with Johnson and Johnson, and I was working on an integrated talent strategy for the finance organization. And part of that strategy was to make sure that we had succession for key roles and also to increase diversity in all of its components, right? Diversity of style, experience, thinking, and as well as, gender and of course, people of color. And that was a 3-year journey for me. And it was legacy work because under the leadership of this specific CFO, he's no longer there, but under his leadership, we were able, I should say, to increase diversity significantly through our VPs of finance. And we also really changed, I would say, his leadership team. We changed pretty significantly in terms of having more, I would say, a greater balance of gender balance on his team. And I have often, not recently, but before the pandemic, I would go back to J&J and just see old friends there. And I'd see certain people that I helped bring into the organization walking around and feel really good about that. So that was just really exciting, very strategic work that I did. And I'm very, very proud of it. I brought external assessment into the organization. So I'll just add this very quickly. Typically, when we were bringing executives into the organization, we were using an external process to assess those external candidates. I said, why not bring it in internal and validate our internal pipelines by using this very objective set of criteria and experiences to see if we truly had the strength of the pipeline that we thought we had. And as a result of that, we did make some changes to our pipeline. So bringing that external assessment piece internal was frankly something that I actually initiated, and then other functions and other businesses within the organization followed suit. So I'm very proud of all of that work.
Amazing. And did you think that assessment removes a lot of the bias?
Absolutely, Chris, because let's face it, in any company, but especially in companies that have been around a long time, you can't help but see that people bring other people along with them, on the basis of friendship, on the basis of comfort. Yeah, right. So the external assessment really alleviates as best it can that bias. And that was really important to us.
Yeah, no, that's why I asked that, because that's typically the reality of business. That's how it works, right? So former colleagues, friends, people it's like, it's just easy, right? As well, it's easier to do that than actually to do it the way you're describing, which is the right way that we should.
I think so.
Yeah, do it as well. So. What advice would you give to people listening that are hoping to go or are on a similar journey? Because that couldn't have been easy, because it's making that change.
If I didn't have the support of the leadership, I wouldn't have, and I mean the leader of the function, I would not have been able to execute on that strategy. But here's what I did. There was a lot of, I would say, hesitation on this assessment process. A lot of, I'm not so sure about this. Maybe it works for external. I'm not so sure. What is this all about? A bunch of industrial psychologists are going to get into our heads.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to go through the assessment. You trust me. I'm going to go through the assessment and I'll let you know. And if I think that it's a waste of time or something that's going to make, everybody uncomfortable, we just won't do it. And I went through the assessment and it was really meaningful. And I came back to the leadership team that I sat on and I gave them a very authentic accounting of what happened. And then that piqued their interest and we sent one or two other members of the LT through it and they loved it. So I did it by sort of putting myself out there. And because I had built trust with this particular group, they were very supportive. And then they went through it themselves and saw that it was really meaningful and impactful. And then we ended up bringing it in. And I think we assessed hundreds of people. And it's not an easy feat to manage. And it's certainly not inexpensive, but it's worth it.
Nice.
Absolutely worth it. So I would say if somebody else was looking to do something like this, make sure that you can speak to it authentically and very credibly by experiencing it yourself.
Yeah, but also get someone as a stakeholder to have that buy-in and that support.
You've got to have the leader bought into it. Otherwise, it'll never work.
Yeah, amazing. And the other thing, what else comes to mind? Obviously, you've had an amazing career. Other things that come to mind?
Listen, I worked on one of the biggest acquisitions and integrations in the history of one of the companies I worked for, and we worked on it for a year, and then we ended up walking away from the deal.
No way!
But
that must have been
that
must have been tough. They're the things that no one talks about, the frustration.
Right. There's been a lot written about it. I'm not going to get into.
Okay, all right. So,
but there was that was a great learning because it was a big acquisition, and I actually worked on the HR growth acceleration team to really put together new policies and new processes and how we were going to bring these, X amount of thousands of people into the organization. And it was great learning. And then it didn't happen. So I would say learned a lot, disappointed that it didn't happen, but didn't happen for the right reasons. I mean, I've got lots of really interesting
What was the main
stories.
thing that you learned, though, from going through that process?
What was the main,
learning that you took away from going through that?
Yeah. What I learned is that a couple things. One is that you really need, when you're doing it, in my opinion, when you're doing an acquisition, there's a tendency to look at the technology that you're going to be acquiring, to look at the synergy between the products. There's a lot of different focus areas that don't include looking at the culture and how the cultures are going to fit. And I think that was a big learning in that particular experience. Early on, I had to read, I just don't know if these folks are going to really adapt to the culture. And we had a very strong culture in this particular company, coming in. And I think earlier on, there needs to be, they do due diligence on lots of different aspects of a deal. do the due diligence on leadership, do the due diligence on the culture and the cultural norms and their value systems, because I think it's really important to know that up front, not when you're like really in the thick of things and then finding things out. Yeah.
I hear that so much, by the way. Like companies just bring in HR at the last minute. Oh, it's all fine now. We're just bringing you. Right. Why were we not involved from the very, very, very beginning?
From day one. I mean, it's like clean up on aisle 9, right?
Yeah.
Now we got to clean it up.
And or sometimes even further down the line, and it's happened, and all of a sudden it's just the disconnect between the two organizations. Culturally, it just people they just lose a ton of talent. Engagement levels go through the floor. They're just all those things which could have been managed and seen way far ahead of time. So I think that's great advice. What would you say some of your pet peeves about working in HR and the function in general?
Yeah, a couple things I'll say. One thing comes to mind, and I've spoken about this before. I have often found that HR and other functions, not just HR, but HR more so than others, feels the need to talk about strategy and use the word strategic. And you don't see or hear finance doing that. You don't hear business development talking about the function itself being strategic. They know what they do is strategic. You don't hear R&D talking about it, but yet HR feels the need because I think there's some sort of a carryover inferiority complex about HR for whatever reason. I mean, I can delve real deep there, but we probably don't have the time. I do find it interesting when there's that overuse of the word strategy and strategic, because even solving problems requires critical thinking and strategy, and you don't have to talk about that. And having plans for talent, that's a strategy. Figuring out how you're going to reward your team members, that's a strategy. I mean, it's just one of those things that I find really irritating. Other functions do too. They feel the need to say, we're strategic, or we should strategically look at that. And what about pulling back and looking at the big strategy? It just feels overused and maybe an overcompensation for feelings of inferiority.
Yeah,
that's probably controversial what I just said.
I don't think, by the way, it's not. All of the leaders I speak to at a very senior level, it drives them crazy. One of the things that drive me crazy as well is the fact that we still need to say HR business partners.
Oh, yeah.
No other function has to say marketing business partner, sales business partner, operator. Like you are the business. You don't have to put it in the title. Like
I agree with that, actually.
I'm a partner to the company.
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of using HR business partners, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
HR is embedded in the business because HR is part of the business.
It is the business. Yeah.
It is the business. Exactly. The people business, really. Yeah.
I love that. No, anything else come to mind?
That's a big one for me. And I'm also a believer, and this is not popular, but I am a believer that those HR leaders that are embedded in the business need to have COEs that support them. Talent management comes to mind, talent acquisition comes to mind. I don't believe HR leaders that are embedded in the business are in service to those COEs. Those COEs, in my mind, are in service to those HR leaders that are working directly with CEOs and presidents and CFOs and marketing leaders. I mean, that to me is something that I've seen in different companies where those COEs kind of, drive the strategy, and the HR folks in the business are just there to execute. I say, no. Those folks that are embedded in the business need to co-create whatever that talent strategy is going to be. It needs to be vetted with them so that we understand that it's going to resonate with the business. And I take that approach with my HR organization.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, again, it comes back to like your point earlier about the inferiority complex and some of the other things?
Well, I think the I was going to say HR business partner. I would say the HR leaders that are embedded in the business are far far capable, I was going to not say far more capable, but certainly very capable of coming up with a meaningful talent strategy and actually help to socialize it with the business leaders because they have the trust of those business leaders. Whereas if many times you've got folks that are in COEs that have not been embedded in the business, all they've done is kind of focused on, talent and talent acquisition and in some cases compensation. And I think it's really important for those COEs to have experiences in the business so that they understand that what they may be creating might not resonate with the business. There's got to be co-creation or there's failure.
Yeah.
There's absolutely, I've not seen anything work without co-creation with the business.
Yeah. Otherwise, also, even amongst those individual functions, it becomes sort of this us and them mentality.
Yes, not good.
And everyone's competing.
I've seen that.
They're competing against each other for budget, for resources, for the ear of those leaders. And it just becomes, I've seen it happen a lot.
Me too.
In companies as well. It's like, wait a minute, you're on the same team here.
I know. There's a little bit of, I've seen arrogance sometimes in some of these areas, and I have zero tolerance. Pet peeve. I have a lot more respect for humility than I do for arrogance. And that's throughout, that transcends HR, just is who I am.
Yeah. I know another thing that you're really a huge advocate of is coaching. Why is coaching, it's kind of stating the obvious, but why is coaching so important to you?
Well, here I go. I have to do my little spiel here because it's really important to me. So I went to Georgetown and I went through the Georgetown coaching program because I know that it's really one of the best in the countries. And I think there are many people out there that call themselves coaches, but I'm not so sure about the training, to be very honest with you. In order to be an effective coach, you have to do a lot of work on yourself, which is not fun, in my opinion. And I'm a natural introvert, so really delving into myself is not, my idea of a good time.
Did you say you're an introvert? But
I am very much an introvert.
Oh, wow. Never
as an extrovert. I know.
I never would have.
It's shocking. I know.
I never would have said that.
Introvert.
Okay.
I'm an introvert. But anyway, I think coaching, people do it obviously as a career. What I found is that I was given the tools and the experience to coach others through that experience at Georgetown in a very meaningful way. And really coaching, in my mind, is just asking the right questions because people already have the answers inside themselves. They already know what they need to do. They just need it teased out through asking the right questions. So there's a big difference between coaching and giving advice. Coaching is really helping the person that you're coaching get to their answers by asking them the right questions and not necessarily, doling out, advice. There's a big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. And I do try to use my coaching techniques in every job that I've had, because I've been a certified coach since 2011.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's something that's come up quite a lot recently in a number of my interviews, and CHRO saying also they see themselves in many ways as a coach to the CEOs that they work with in their organizations, and having many of them reference their skills of getting trained to be coached as part of their success in being able to work with different leaders throughout the organization. But they also do say exactly what you said. It needs to start with you first, actually, which just comes up more often. And not actually, and it's not easy, as you said, because you need to understand yourself and the good, the bad, the ugly, and however else along.
It's not pretty, to your point. It's not pretty. I mean, when I was going through the program, we had to be at Georgetown at least once a month, and we'd work in cohorts. And, it wasn't a complete day unless there were tears, because we were constantly, exploring ourselves, and it was tough, but it's the best way to go. You got to understand yourself first before you can bring that to others. So
amazing. Well, Lori, thank you so much for
Thank
coming on the show. We
you.
went a lot longer than 30 minutes, but I was enjoying it so much that I didn't want to let you go.
That's wonderful.
I already knew we
Thank
wouldn't make
you.
it for 30 minutes, but it was a good thing. I loved it. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, and enjoy the holidays and New Year. And I look forward to seeing you next year. But I really appreciate you joining us on the show to share your experience with everyone.
Thank you, Chris. And please come out to the farm. I'd love to host you here.
I
We
love
have a
it.
lot of fun.
Will do. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye now.